a sleeping prophet saw the earth crack open, and the fractures just appeared on satellite. His name was Edgar Cayce. For decades, he closed his eyes and spoke predictions that defied logic. Most were dismissed. Some came true. But one forecast was so catastrophic, so specific, that after his death in 1945, it was quietly buried. He said the Earth's magnetic field would destabilize. He said the poles would shift. He said entire coastlines would vanish beneath the sea. And he gave a timeline. Scientists are now seeing the signs. Magnetic north is drifting faster than it has in centuries. The Greenland ice sheet is losing mass at an accelerating rate. Ocean currents that have held steady for millennia are slowing. And deep beneath the surface, something is stirring. If this unsettles you, subscribe now. What comes next explains why it matters. Cayce wasn't a scientist. He was a photographer from Kentucky who discovered he could enter a trance state and diagnose illnesses he'd never studied. Thousands sought his readings. Most were medical, but occasionally he would speak about the future. And in 1934, during one of these sessions, he described a series of geological catastrophes that would begin with subtle shifts. Shifts so gradual that no one would notice until it was too late. He said the first sign would be unusual activity in the Mediterranean. Earthquakes, volcanic eruptions, then the Arctic, then the Pacific Ring of Fire. He said these events would culminate in a pole shift, a physical reorientation of the Earth's axis that would redraw the map. He was laughed out of the room. But here's the problem. In 2001, researchers at the European Space Agency launched a satellite to measure Earth's magnetic field with unprecedented precision. What they found startled them. The field wasn't stable. It was weakening. In some regions, it was weakening fast. By 2020, an anomaly over the South Atlantic had grown so large that it began affecting satellites passing through it. Engineers had to reprogram spacecraft to avoid radiation exposure. The anomaly is still growing. And magnetic north, the point every compass on Earth relies on, is now racing toward Siberia at nearly 40 miles per year. That's 40 times faster than it moved a century ago. No one can explain why. Cayce's readings said the shift would begin in the Arctic. In 2019, a team of glaciologists published findings that the Greenland ice sheet was losing ice 7 times faster than it was in the 1990s. Not melting slowly, accelerating. In 2021, another study revealed that a massive freshwater pulse from melting ice was disrupting the Atlantic meridional overturning circulation, the ocean current that regulates climate across the northern hemisphere. The current has slowed by 15% since the mid-20th century. If it collapses, Europe freezes. North America floods. Weather patterns that have existed since the last ice age vanish. And according to paleoclimate records, the last time this current collapsed, it happened in less than a decade. Cayce said volcanic activity would increase in the Mediterranean. In September 2021, a volcano that had been dormant for 50 years erupted on the island of La Palma in the Canary Islands. It didn't stop for 3 months. Lava consumed entire towns. The eruption was so violent that seismologists detected fractures spreading across the island's western flank. Some warned that if the flank collapsed, it could trigger a mega tsunami that would cross the Atlantic and devastate the eastern seaboard of the United States. The fractures are still there. They're widening. In 2022, researchers analyzing sediment cores from the Mediterranean discovered something unsettling. Layers of ash and debris indicated that roughly 12,000 years ago, the region experienced a sudden, catastrophic series of eruptions and earthquakes, events that coincided with the end of the last ice age and a rapid spike in global temperatures. The timing matched another phenomenon, a geomagnetic excursion. That's when the magnetic poles don't fully reverse, but wander erratically for centuries before stabilizing. During the last excursion, Earth's magnetic field weakened to less than 10% of its current strength. Cosmic radiation flooded the atmosphere. Civilizations collapsed. Entire species went extinct. And when it was over, the map of the world had changed. Cayce's readings didn't just predict geological chaos. They predicted a time frame. He said the early warning signs would appear by the end of the 20th century. The full shift, he claimed, would occur in the early decades of the 21st. We're in those decades now, and the signs are no longer subtle. In 2023, scientists at the University of Colorado published a study showing that Earth's rotation is slowing. Not by much, just milliseconds per year, but enough to require periodic adjustments to atomic clocks. The cause? A redistribution of mass. Glaciers are melting. Water is moving from the poles to the equator. The planet is becoming less stable. But here's where it gets strange. In 2018, a geophysicist named John Tardino analyzed volcanic rocks in South Africa that recorded Earth's magnetic field from millions of years ago. He found evidence of rapid pole reversals. Reversals that happened not over thousands of years as previously believed, but in less than a century. In some cases, less than a decade. The magnetic field, he concluded, is far more volatile than anyone thought. And once a reversal begins, there's no stopping it. You can only watch. Cayce said something else. He said that before the shift, there would be unusual weather, storms that broke records, droughts that lasted years, floods in places that had never flooded before. In 2023, Libya experienced rainfall so intense that 2 dams collapsed, killing more than 11,000 people in a single night. In the same year, wildfires in Canada burned an area larger than the state of Florida, sending smoke across half of North America. In 2024, the Mediterranean reached its highest recorded temperature, over 90 degrees Fahrenheit. Marine biologists found species migrating north at unprecedented rates, fleeing water that had become uninhabitable. None of this proves Cayce was right, but it's getting harder to prove he was wrong. The geological record shows that pole shifts are not theoretical. They've happened before, many times. The last full reversal occurred 780,000 years ago. We're overdue, and during past reversals, Earth's magnetic shield, the invisible barrier that protects us from solar wind and cosmic radiation, weakened dramatically. Without that shield, the atmosphere begins to erode. Satellites fail. Power grids collapse. The aurora borealis appears at the equator, and life on the surface becomes exposed to radiation levels that cause mutations, cancers, and mass die-offs. Cayce described all of this in trance with his eyes closed in 1934. But there's a twist. Some scientists now believe that pole shifts don't cause catastrophes. They coincide with them. The shift is a symptom, not a cause. What's driving the instability isn't the magnetic field. It's the core. Deep beneath the mantle in the outer core, liquid iron churns in convective currents that generate Earth's magnetic field. If those currents change, if the temperature or composition of the core shifts, the field weakens. And if the field weakens, the poles wander. But what could change the core? One theory: the sudden redistribution of mass on the surface. Melting ice, rising seas, the weight of water shifting from one hemisphere to another. The planet, in other words, responding to what we've done to it. Cayce didn't have access to satellites. He didn't have magnetic field data or ice core samples or seismic networks. He had a trance state and a voice that spoke in fragments. And yet, line by line, his predictions are aligning with measurements taken by instruments he couldn't have imagined. In 2020, researchers at the Technical University of Denmark published a study on the movement of magnetic north. They noted that the acceleration began around 1990, exactly when Cayce said the signs would start. They also noted that if the current trend continues, magnetic north will cross the geographic North Pole within the next 30 years. When that happens, compasses will point south. Navigation systems will fail. Migratory animals, birds, whales, sea turtles, will lose their way. And the aurora, that shimmering curtain of light, will appear in skies where it's never been seen before. Cayce said the shift would be violent. He said Japan would sink. He said the Great Lakes would empty into the Gulf of Mexico. He said Los Angeles and San Francisco would be destroyed. He said new land would rise in the Atlantic and the Pacific. And he said that when it was over, the climate would be unrecognizable. Temperate zones would become tropical. Polar regions would bloom, and the survivors would have to start over. Most dismissed him as a charlatan. But a small group of geologists began paying attention after 2004, when a magnitude 9. One earthquake struck off the coast of Sumatra. The quake was so powerful that it shifted the Earth's axis by nearly an inch and shortened the length of a day by microseconds. It also triggered tsunamis that killed more than 200,000 people. Cayce had mentioned Sumatra. He said it would be one of the first places to experience catastrophic seismic activity. He said it in 1934. In 2011, Japan was hit by a magnitude 9.0 earthquake. The tsunami that followed killed nearly 20,000 people and triggered the Fukushima nuclear disaster. The quake shifted Japan's main island 8 feet to the east. It also shifted Earth's axis by 4 inches. Cayce had said Japan would sink. It hasn't, but it moved, and the Pacific plate beneath it is still adjusting. In 2023, Turkey and Syria were struck by twin earthquakes that killed more than 50,000 people. The fault line that ruptured had been quiet for centuries. Cayce had said the Mediterranean would be a flashpoint. He said the region would experience unprecedented seismic activity in the lead up to the shift. Every year, his words sound less like prophecy and more like schedule. But here's the contradiction no one talks about. Cayce also said that the timing of the shift could be altered. Not stopped, altered. He said human consciousness played a role. That mass awareness, collective intention, and spiritual evolution could delay or soften the catastrophe. He didn't explain how. He just said it. And then he died, leaving behind 14,000 transcripts of trance readings and no mechanism to verify or disprove what he'd seen. So we're left with a question. If the poles are shifting, and the data suggests they are, do we have any say in what comes next? Or are we just passengers on a planet that's already made up its mind? In 2021, a team of researchers at the University of Leeds published a simulation of what a pole shift would look like in real time. They modeled the magnetic field weakening, the atmosphere thinning, and the cascading failures in infrastructure. The simulation ran for 100 years. By year 50, most coastal cities were uninhabitable. By year 70, agriculture had collapsed in the northern hemisphere. By year 90, global population had decreased by half. The simulation didn't account for war, famine, or panic. It only measured the physical effects. And even then, the results were catastrophic. Cayce's readings were never meant to be scientific. They were spiritual. He believed that Earth was a living being, and that shifts in its body reflected shifts in its consciousness. He believed that humanity was linked to the planet in ways that couldn't be measured by instruments. And he believed that what was coming wasn't punishment, it was transformation. But transformation has a cost. In 2024, scientists at NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory detected an anomaly in Earth's gravitational field, a subtle shift in mass distribution that couldn't be explained by melting ice alone. Something deeper was moving, something in the mantle. They didn't publish the findings. They didn't want to cause panic. But the data is there, locked in servers, waiting. Cayce said that when the shift began, it would feel like the ground was breathing, that earthquakes would come in waves, not isolated events, that volcanoes would wake up in clusters, and that the sky would change color. In 2023, residents across North America reported seeing strange hues at sunset, deep reds and purples that lingered for hours. Atmospheric scientists attributed it to wildfire smoke, but the colors appeared in regions with no fires, and they appeared on nights when the air was clear. The magnetic poles are not the only things moving. In 2022, geologists discovered that the geographic North Pole, the point where Earth's axis of rotation intersects the surface, is also drifting. It's moving toward Russia at a rate of 4 inches per year. That might not sound like much, but it's unprecedented. For the last century, the geographic pole barely moved at all. Now it's wandering, and no one knows why. Cayce said the shift would happen in stages. First, the signs, then the acceleration, then the event itself. He said the event would last days, maybe weeks, and when it was over, the world would be unrecognizable. He didn't say whether humanity would survive. He just said that those who did would remember what came before, and they would rebuild. We're in the acceleration phase now. The magnetic field is weakening. The poles are moving. The ice is melting. The currents are slowing. And deep beneath the surface, in the outer core, something is changing. Scientists can measure it. They can model it, but they can't stop it. Cayce once said that the greatest tragedy wasn't the shift itself. It was that people would see the signs and do nothing, that they would rationalize, dismiss, and delay until it was too late to prepare. He said humanity had a choice: evolve or repeat, adapt or collapse. And he said that choice would be made not by governments or institutions, but by individuals, one by one, in quiet moments, when the ground beneath them started to feel unstable. The fractures are already here. We just haven't looked down yet.